Solar for developers and affordable housing. We're going to get started in just a minute. I'm just waiting to give everybody an opportunity to join in. But while I do that, I just wanted to go over a couple of house rules, if you will. First of all, all the attendees, obviously, their microphones are muted during the presentation. So if you have any questions that you'd like to ask, there's a chat button on your toolbar. You can go ahead and type your questions into chat. And once we get to the end of the presentation, I have allotted some time for Q&A. So I'll be going through those questions and attempting to answer those. Also wanted to let everybody know, if you find this interesting or missed a part of it, we are going to be sending out a link to the video of this meeting, as well as some tools that go along with what we're discussing today. And so we'll be emailing that out to everybody that joined in, like I said, after we get this meeting wrapped up. And so we have a fairly tight timeline here today. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. Again, if you have any questions, drop those in chat and we'll get to them when we get to the end here. So before we get started, I just wanted to introduce myself. My name is Doug Weishar, and I'm the Director of Commercial Sales here at GreenSpark. For those of you not familiar with our organization, we are a local solar developer and installer. We're in the Rochester area, and I've been doing renewable energy projects for a little over 20 years now. So we have a pretty big footprint in this area and all across the northeastern United States. Additionally, we are a certified B Corporation, and as it says on your screen, we are dedicated to using our business as a force for good. Additionally, our company has been very fast growing. If you know anybody that's interested in solar, have them check us out because we're always hiring. We've also been ranked in the fastest growing companies in the Finger Lakes pretty consistently over the last handful of years. Also top workplace. So it's always nice to get some accolades. All right, so we're going to go ahead and get started. And before we dive right into some of the solar specifics, just wanted to talk a little bit about some of what has been driving the growth of solar in New York State. In addition to obviously it being clean energy and very effective from a cost perspective, New York State has some pretty ambitious climate and energy goals, including sourcing 70% of their electricity from renewables and 100% zero emission new building construction. So those have been driving a lot of the interest and activity, especially amongst affordable housing communities and developers in that and related industries. Oh, why solar? I feel like after a dozen or so years, I shouldn't have to say this anymore, but obviously there's a lot of us that have sustainability goals that we're trying to hit. Additionally, we have financial goals we're trying to hit. Solar helps sort of satisfy both of those. So in addition to helping you reach your climate goals, which is a benefit for you, for our local community, for your employees, it also helps you reduce your operating costs at the facilities where the solar is hooked up. So it's a double win there. All right, so let's dive right in. From a legislation perspective, many of you have probably heard that we recently passed the Inflation Reduction Act. And as a part of that bill, there's a lot of incentives that come along with solar and EV charging and EVs. But I'm going to focus just a little bit on what the impact was on solar, since that's our focus today here. So first thing that the Inflation Reduction Act did was it restored the investment tax credit back to 30%. So it was on an annual decline there for a couple of years, but it's now back up to 30%, and that's fixed for the next 10 years. So there's some certainty and some security to that tax credit, where in years gone by, it had always been sort of a year-to-year thing to see whether it's going to stay where it was, whether it was going to continue to devolve downwards as a percentage. But that 30% tax credit is available to everybody. Another really exciting addition to that tax credit involves those in the not-for-profit sector. So historically, as a not-for-profit entity, most people were not able to find a way to monetize the ITC. with part of this bill, what they've done is they've made for nonprofit entities, they've made the tax credit fully refundable, which means at the end of the year, you can file for the tax credit and you'll receive a check back from the government for the value of your tax credit. So that applies to solar and storage, together or separately. Historically, it's only been solar and storage combined. There's a bunch of rules that go along with the Inflation Reduction Act and all the incentives that we're talking about today that all are not written as of yet. So we're going to stay a little bit high level at this point, but if you have some specific projects that you want to talk about, happy to dive in with as much as we know now. We're expecting the rules to be published very shortly, probably in the next couple of weeks here. So in addition to the 30% ITC or investment tax credit, they've also added some bonus designations where you can earn additional tax credits on top of the 30%. And those are going to be for things like all domestically produced content. That's not a reality right now just because of the state of manufacturing in our industry and many others. But I would expect that because of the bonus credits that are available, that'll probably become a reality in the next couple of years. So low income offtake is also a qualifier where you can get an additional 10% on your tax credit. Low income housing developments is another one. On brownfields would be another one. And so basically, once these rules are written, we can figure out how high you can stack them, but we expect that you'd be able to stack up to 50%, which means you'd be able to get a tax credit or a direct pay refund for up to 50% of the project cost, which is pretty outstanding. So in addition to the tax credits that are available for solar, like everything else, solar qualifies for depreciation, and it currently qualifies for bonus depreciation too. So you can take that on top of whatever the tax credit is that you're receiving for the project, and again, that depends on your tax status, and so you'd have to check with your tax professional to determine how that would apply to you. But it's a standard makers 5-year write down, or if you take the bonus depreciation, it's 80% year one. So that's available. And then in addition to that, New York State also provides funding through NYSERDA and the New York Sun program. The one thing I will say about the New York Sun program is it is first come, first serve. It's pretty healthy right now, especially for the size projects that typically happen on site. But that is first come, first serve, and where the current block of funding is at the moment, we expect that in the near term, that's going to decrease a little bit. Good news for those of you that are on the call they're involved with affordable housing, because right now there's an adder for certain projects, but the multifamily affordable housing incentive is $1 a watt. It's basically triple what the current incentive is for a non-affordable housing incentive, and this is paid out as an upfront incentive. It has some rules and some limitations about how you do the project, about how much they'll fund at that rate, et cetera, but we don't need to get that all in today. The news here is there's an amazing incentive. Again, this is further reducing those costs that are 30 to 50% reduced by that tax credit. And so you can see on this sheet, and again, we'll be sending out this information to everyone after this wraps up. But if you have a project that qualifies under any of the structures that are listed below, you're eligible to receive this incentive through NYSERDA for on-site solar. These are HUD projects, these are HCR projects, these are low-income housing tax credit projects. You can see it all here on the screen. So if one of your project qualifies, you should definitely reach out and see what we can do for you with regards to solar, because the financial returns and the cost reduction, which all help promote more affordable housing, are really there for these types of projects. Okay, so I wanted to get into a little bit of a discussion about some of the things that we need to be thinking about with adding solar to a building, right? So before I get in, when we do projects, we do them all different ways. On site, right on the rooftop, right? And that's mostly what we're talking about today. And so we maximize the roof space that can take solar. We put the solar on, it helps reduce your costs, right? The other option would be if there's ground space, on site at the building. You can also build it on the ground. Depending on where you're located, that might be more or less feasible. In many of the cases that I've seen, ground space is pretty tight. So, excuse me. So it's not always an option, but it can be done. And another option would be to build the project offsite. And that is available for everybody, but some of these incentives work differently when you're offsite. So feel free to reach out to us to figure out what works best for your project. Okay, so for those of you that have existing buildings that you're considering for solar, some of this stuff might be beyond your control, but we've been doing a lot of work in the new construction industry, and so just wanted to talk through a little bit of things to keep in mind when you're starting the initial design plans for your building. So from an electrical perspective, our inverters. These are the devices that take the solar power we generate and then pump them back into your facility. These inverters can be indoors, they can be outdoors, but there needs to be space for them. In many cases, they can go right on the roof next to the solar array, but that does take up some space that otherwise might be available to produce more power, right? So it's a thought process there. If we can have space in the electrical room or any other accessible storage room, that would be great. Depending on the size of your system would determine, basically how much wall space we might need, but it's something just to keep in mind, as you're thinking through your existing building or a new construction building. Conduits to the roof, if you're thinking about, if you're building a new building and you're thinking about doing solar at some point, running those conduits when the building's open makes the installation process faster, easier, and less expensive ultimately for you. The other thing we need is breaker space, right? So giving some thought to the fact that there's going to be additional circuits that would be added with solar, it's something to mention to your electrical designer. All right, so layouts. So many of the buildings that we work with in the commercial space are flat roof, and so orientation becomes how we orient the panels on the roof. But generally, we're looking for something in the southern direction. And that would determine whether we're laying out the panels lengthwise on the building or widthwise. More importantly than sort of how we lay out our panels in terms of consideration is probably thinking about the other equipment that's going to be up on the roof. So where's the roof hatch going to be located? Where are the RTUs going to be located? Are you putting gas piping on the roof, et cetera, et cetera? And so we can work around just about all of that stuff, but it does reduce the amount of space that we can put solar panels in, which reduces the amount of power you can generate for your building. With any serviceable equipment like an RTU, we have to leave 4 foot of space all around plus an access pathway. Not a problem, very common, but something to consider. If you can locate them all to one side of the building so that we're making space for 3 or 4 as opposed to just one, that just will optimize the amount of power you can generate for yourself. Roof loads. And so we get a lot of questions and we have a lot of discussion in this space about what solar means for a building from a structural perspective. And so flat roofs, ballasted arrays is the most common in our area. It depends on the height of your building, the height of your parapet, and exactly how things are laid out. But you're typically adding somewhere between 3 and 6 pounds per square foot. And that's a distributed load across your roof. So it's really not a significant amount of weight that you're adding to the roof, but something that you should let, again, your designers know if it's a new building or something that we have to evaluate on an existing building to make sure that from a structural perspective, we're not going to diminish any of the integrity of the building. So just one other thing I wanted to mention well, I guess that'll be on the next section. So the other thing I wanted to mention about roofing is the reason most of us are doing in the industry are doing ballasted arrays on flat roofs is because it significantly limits or eliminates the need for penetrations through the roof, right? And so flat roofs have their own set of fun maintenance things to deal with, but plugging more holes in it is not something that we generally prefer to do. So ballasted roofs can be 100% penetration free, which means that you're not going to have additional holes in your membrane. Sometimes, depending on the wind loads or the height of the building or other structural needs, you may have to have some anchor points, but you're not going to have the number of penetrations that you would have if it was fully adhered to the roof. So that is definitely a benefit, especially on the flat roof roofing systems. And so for existing buildings, well, and new builds, but for existing buildings, we're always going to try and figure out whether your roof is under warranty. We can work with your roofing manufacturer to figure out what their protocols are for installing on top of their roof so that we don't void any existing warranties. And in many cases, we can get, especially on new builds, we can get a pre-inspection and a post-inspection of our install. And so they'll certify at the time of installation that your new roof or existing roof warranty is still fully intact. The way that we do these installs and the way that most manufacturers require it to be done is you're going to have slip sheets, which is the same roofing material that covers your roof, but we just add a sheet underneath any piece of equipment that sits on your roof. That way there's no actual contact between any of our equipment and your existing roof. So we have that sacrificial layer in between the two to prevent, if there's any slight movement or any weight loading issues that might cause a puncture, it just eliminates that by keeping them separate. So I think that's about everything I wanted to say about that topic. But if you take anything away from this, solar is possible and very feasible on any building, existing or new. But if you have the opportunity to design or refine the layout that's happening on top of your roof in terms of other mechanical systems, it just leaves more space for you to be able to do your solar, which will obviously help you reduce or eliminate some of your operating costs. So now I just wanted to flip over to a couple of case studies. So these are a couple of folks that are in the industry that have done solar projects to help them meet their internal goals for sustainability, as well as, in most all cases, significantly reduce their operating costs at some of these sites. So the first one you're looking at on the screen here, this is an offsite project that was done to power 6 existing affordable housing projects that are scattered throughout the Rochester area. The system itself is just slightly outside of Rochester in Ontario, New York, right down the road from our headquarters. And this array essentially powers 300 homes. And these are all homes that the owner, which in this case is home leasing, that they're paying the utility costs for. So they have made an investment, reaped the rewards of many of the programs that we just discussed in terms of the incentives, and now are going to experience long-term cost reductions from what they were previously paying. Another project that's currently underway, which is why you see some diagrams here, is for Push Buffalo. And so Push Buffalo is a neighborhood coalition that is working very hard to further affordable housing. And this project's in Buffalo, New York, hence the name. And so they have small multifamily, 2, 4, 6 unit buildings that they're either rehabbing from existing structures or building new on a couple of city blocks in downtown Buffalo. And this project in particular that we're adding solar in conjunction with their rehab and construction project is going to be 49 new affordable housing properties that will be available to the residents of Buffalo. Right here, back to Rochester, 270 on East. Many of you might have seen or driven by this building. This is another project, did rooftop solar. And this project, which is pretty typical of affordable housing apartment buildings, provides all their power to offset the common area costs. So the common area heating and cooling, lighting, et cetera. In this case, I believe this building is 100% electrified, so their common area costs from electricity are a little bit higher than when you have a different heating mix in there. All right, so we're about just over 20 minutes into this. So I'm going to jump over to the chat here real quick and see if we have any Q&A loaded up from you guys out there that have questions. Okay, I got a couple in here, so I'm gonna go through this now. If there's anybody else that's on the call, I did mention this in the beginning, but if you have any questions, there's a chat button. Feel free to go ahead and just type in any questions that you may have, and I'll be happy to address them as best I can. First question that came in is who completes the applications for incentives? So generally speaking, we do everything that we can. As a company, we like to offer and deliver turnkey projects. So for us, we handle NYSERDA applications. So we take care of writing the application, collecting the funds, and in most cases, we'll go ahead and just credit you for the money right up front. In the case of the tax incentives that we were talking about, we are not tax preparers, and we're not able to do that. And that's something that's done on your own company's income taxes. So that would be handled by the customer's tax accountant at the time they file their income taxes. The next question, how does solar work with multiple units as opposed to one large building? So I started talking about that a little bit with that project we just looked at, and I'll see if I can pop back to that screen. But 270 on East, right? They have a house meter plus individual unit meters, and so solar can work in a couple of different ways on that. The most common way that it's done is that it gets interconnected through the house meter. And then if there's excess credits above and beyond what their house loads are, you can distribute that to the residential meters that are located on your site. The questions about how and when that happens really are very project specific, because in some cases, those meters are also paid by the entity that owns the building. And in other cases, those might be paid by the individual residents. Not so much anymore in new construction, but it does happen. Sometimes you'll have a master metered facility where all the units and the house loads are all combined into one single meter. Again, that works the same way. That's really the easiest way to do it, because you don't have to worry about distributing credits to individual units. It just all goes on the master meter. So there's a couple different ways to handle that. Ultimately, it depends on the building itself, but there's solutions for just about every situation. Good question. Can you supply an estimate pre-construction? 100%. We do it quite regularly here. And what you're basically looking for is trying to figure out, what are your loads going to be in the building, and then what of them can be offset by solar. And so we're going to start looking at things like, what's the expected loading on the roof in terms of additional equipment? Is there going to be piping up there, to try and get a figure of how much square footage is there, and then how much of that is actually usable, and how much of that is going to be taken up by other pieces of equipment. And we can provide you an estimate with along those lines with that information. It's very common that as you go through the from a conceptual idea through the phases to construction, that design, like every other part of the building, sort of evolves, right? As we get to know more and more about exactly how and where everything's going to be placed and what's needed at the building, it's likely that over those couple of years that maybe there's 2 or 3 revisions. And I can also tell you, in new construction, it's also very common that there's minor modifications when we get on site for construction, right? So sometimes things that didn't appear on a drawing, there's a vent and it didn't exist on the drawing, or it wasn't labeled on the drawing. And so you need to move a panel around a little bit, but that stuff's all pretty easy, and real little changes like that, a panel here, a panel there, are not really impactful to the overall project. It's the big things we're trying to figure out, right? Like, I had a customer recently that, we did the layout for the building, and we got on site and realized that none of the plumbing vents that are on the roof were listed on any set of drawings, including the as-built. And so it was it was hundreds of spots where we had to work around those things. So that significantly impacted that. So any information you have with regards to anything that may be coming on the roof, even if we don't know exactly where it's going to be, could be real helpful in guiding us to dial that in. But we're happy to do that. I'll go back to my contact information there. Feel free to give me a call, email. We're happy to talk to you about your project, discuss what specific incentives will apply, and as well as get that on paper in terms of an estimate. All right. So I don't see any other questions in the Q&A. So I just wanted to jump to one other thing, and then I'll skip back here and see if there's any other questions. And if not, we can get this wrapped up. Oop. Back to this.